Two things to talk about. Number one is what is going on with MLB umpires? Are they going to be wearing these face coverings or not? And number two is you, as an umpire coming off of several months of inactivity, are you going to wear one of these or not? Let's start with MLB because we've gone around to this sort of spring training or summer training, whatever they're going to call it. And some of the umpires have these face coverings. Some of them have blue gloves on, and some of them have nothing at all. Well, actually, very few of them have no protective equipment involved because most of them are having something. Also, there's a face shield that MLB is developing that the plate umpire might have that actually could help quite a deal. But let's talk about these first. You just put them on. These are really easy. And the question is, can you wear them with... I brought the bucket out because it's heavier, right? And so I thought, well, I should take something heavier rather than something that's lighter to see how it works. And it's a bit weird to get used to, but you get used to it. A lot of the problem is you haven't been doing this for months on end, and if you haven't been doing it for months on end, then you're not used to it, and that's where it causes problems. And that's where you can get sort of dehydrated and things like that. So just work yourself up, and this, I guess, would apply to both the MLB guys and to all the men and women who officiate baseball and softball that are not at the MLB level, just if you're doing youth sports in your area, if it is safe to do so. You might not be used to that level of activity, especially if you want one of these as well. So just drink a lot of water and pace yourself. But specifically for the MLB umpires, we've seen umpires throughout the country that are wearing these. We have seen some that are wearing the blue gloves. Joe West wore that in Tampa, and then most recently, Joe West and Mark Wegner switched to that face shield on top of the mask or bucket. It comes underneath here, and it basically takes care of your nose and mouth. And Perry Barber had asked the World Baseball and Softball Confederation about it and said, well, why not the eyes too? And they said, well, we need to get visibility. We don't want to mess with visibility because you could get glare and things like that. So that's the dilemma. 100% safety versus 100% encumbrance, somewhere in the middle, presumably, is the answer. What's really, really interesting, you go around the country, see what all the umpires are doing. I'll give you an example. Joe West in Tampa Bay, the outspoken COVID calculation critic. Again, Joe's stance is really nuanced. He says the numbers are inflated. The virus itself is not a hoax. The virus is real, but the numbers are too high. Nonetheless, Joe, because he does think the virus is real, the first day he didn't wear the protective face covering. The second day he had the plate, he did wear the protective face covering. Then he got, time out, my new mask has arrived. So he got his face mask with the plastic inserts, and he wore that. And it's well, what if you take it off? That's another question. But regardless, he wore the protective gear. Mark Wegner, who's also in Tampa Bay, also wore the protective gear. We've seen photos all around the country of people wearing protective gear of various nature. What was really interesting in San Francisco, Gabe Kapler's the manager over there, and he was praising Doug Eddings and Bill Miller to the media. He was so happy because, why? Because, well, Bill Miller had a thin pre-surgical mask, if you will. The Giants said, no, we have this black cloth that's a little bit thicker. If you want to wear them, we have these for you. And Bill Miller said, sure. And Doug Eddings said, sure. Doug Eddings had the plate. And so he still said, sure. He took it, he put it on, put the helmet on top of it, and no problem. He worked it. It is a little unusual at first. You do have to get used to it. But the body is very good at adapting to things, and Gabe Kapler was just so happy and so willing to praise the umpires for doing this for him. It's like, you're showing that you care about the team. This is a good game management thing, by the way, that's not even related to COVID. If you can show a team that you care about them, they are less likely to give you a bad time because they're like, oh, it's umpires working with me. And that's sort of what you saw with the San Francisco situation. Show that you care, and the team is going to be happy about it and will treat you with a lot more respect. Over in Oakland, however, across the Bay Bridge, a little bit different situation because you saw the plate umpire, or I saw the plate umpire, it looked like Gabe Morales, and Brian Knight was the day before working the plate, and you have this, you have the mask on top of it, and you have gloves on your hands. Rob Drake working the bases, and this should, as a sidebar, does it answer the question if did he get suspended or not? Maybe that helps. But he's on the bases, and he has nothing protective gear. No, he doesn't have this. He doesn't have gloves. Nothing. I mean, he doesn't have gloves. He's not handling any baseball, so maybe he doesn't need gloves. And maybe the rationale is, well, I don't need this because I'm not within 6 feet of anyone, whereas the plate guys are. But the argument was always, well, the plate, you wear this, it's such a burden to breathe and all of that, and it's tough. It is tough. The thicker cloth masks are a lot tougher to breathe. So you have to sort of streamline it and mitigate that and meter it for something that is breathable material that you can wear underneath your mask. But was again sidebar, what was interesting was Rob Drake had nothing, but the plate guy did. You don't want to bring politics into it. You don't want to bring that sort of discussion in because this is sports and we go to sports to try to get away from that. But at the same time, when it's so apparent as, are you wearing a mask or not? And you can clearly see whether someone is or not, it's a discussion to be had. One discussion that is not being had that every umpire, no matter where you fall on the politics, should feel pretty good about is the discussion not being had about electronic strike zones and robot umpires. Did you notice when this whole thing started back in March, and of course the years prior to, the constant thread was, we're going to get electronic balls and strikes, and the idea was COVID. That's the excuse to get electronic balls and strikes when they were conceptualizing what to do back in March. Now that we're in July, and it's come down to what are we actually going to do, that we're going back to work, what are we actually going to do, the actual physical boots on ground steps that we're taking, the electronic strike zone, the automated ball strike system, is nowhere to be heard. So that should make every human umpire feel good, because we wouldn't be having these conversations, these extended conversations about what to do with human umpires in the COVID-19 world. Do we need to put plate umpires in these things? Do we give them the plastic face shields on top of their or below their masks? We wouldn't be having any of those conversations if we were serious about doing electronic strike zones. So this, if nothing else, should confirm to you that no matter what MLB Brass's talk is about electronic strike zones, when it comes down not to concepts or theories, but when it comes down to actually doing the work and putting the ball in play, they need humans behind home plate. Otherwise, we wouldn't be going through all these safety measures if they didn't need human umpires behind home plate. Anywho, those are my thoughts. Visit us online at closecallsports.com, Twitter and Facebook at Umpire Ejections, and we will see you on the site.